Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. In this episode, I'll be talking about the impact that corporate media and marketing, better known as, quote, society, is having on us. The impact that media marketing is having on us as women. And I've titled this episode, Empowered or Overexposed. And, just moving into the conversation, I'm someone who really promotes what has become kind of a buzz phrase, talking about women's empowerment, youth empowerment, girls empowerment. I have embraced and I do my best to promote empowerment. But I think it's important that we understand what empowerment is. And I'm finding that as I'm working with young women, we are somehow giving them an idea that their empowerment is in their sexuality. Their empowerment is in the overt expression of their sexuality. And, unfortunately, I'm not talking about grown women, although, this definitely relates to grown women, but often I'm looking at young girls who are really expressing their sexuality in a very public way at very, very early ages. And to a great extent, what it appears to be is them mimicking what they see women who they find to be relevant, women who they find to be popular, women who they find easily accessible, through social media, television, YouTube. They appear to be mimicking these women and kind of copying how they dress, copying how they act in public, and even copying their language, thinking that by putting on a full show, they are showing how confident they are. They're showing how strong they are. They're showing how firmly rooted in their identity that they are. But any of us, those of us who are in our 30s or 40s, we certainly know that being an early teen, a tween, being an early teen, and going through adolescence, that grounding, that confidence, that self-possession, that comes in through life experiences, that comes in through facing challenges and overcoming them, or being succumbed by challenges and learning from those incidents. But these young ladies, they haven't experienced it yet, and nor do they always know that these things are coming and that what they're doing in so many ways is a caricature of what it is that they want to be or who they want to be. And so I personally, I reject the notion that a woman's power is in her sexuality and the real obvious expression of it, whether it's through the clothes that we wear, whether they're revealing, whether they're skimpy or alluring, our language in talking about sex and sexuality and sexual acts, and certainly, crude or lewd behavior. I reject that. That is where a woman's power lies. But I think if we don't understand what empowerment is, and if our young women don't understand what empowerment is, then they will continue following artists, personalities that trend in media, who pretend at being empowered or who define themselves as being an empowered woman who rocks her, sensuality or sexuality openly. Our young people are going to emulate that if they think that's what empowerment is. But empowerment simply means that someone is growing stronger. They're becoming more confident. They are accepting. They're accepting themselves, and they're grabbing onto the authority to express themselves. And so this is what I strive to impart to young women when I'm working with them, when I go through what I call E3, which is empowerment, which is enlightening, empowerment, and engagement. And, starting with the first E with enlightenment, one is just sharing information, sharing knowledge with them, putting them up on what's real and what's not, helping them see through the fog of the social media phoniness, quite honestly, and helping them understand that what they're watching on television doesn't necessarily reflect real life. These people are literal characters playing roles, and that we shouldn't design our lives based off of a character or a role we see portrayed through a vehicle for entertainment. And so, working with them and enlightening them and sharing information with them and imparting knowledge on them. So that's enlightenment. And then empowerment, letting them know that, look, you can just be yourself. You don't need the eyelashes. You don't need the weave. You don't need the super long nails. You don't need the makeup. You don't need the lipstick. And this is so important to say to young people, because our young women are getting younger and younger, and they're putting all of this stuff on. And I remember years ago, I used to talk about, a sister potato head. Like we would, and we still do as Black women, we hide under these layers of hair and makeup and fingernails, and we hide who we are, when we can just kind of scrub all of that stuff off and face the world. But so many of our young women at very young ages feel uncomfortable walking out the house, just being themselves. They feel like, if they don't have the weave, then they're going to be clowned. They really believe that if they, don't have the makeup or they don't have the eyelashes. I mean, a woman who was wearing eyelashes years ago was someone who was performing on stage or having a very, very special night out, with her husband or with her friends. But now we have 11-year-olds putting on eyelashes on their very, very sensitive area of their bodies, their eyes, getting terrible eye infections. These young women are putting on weaves, getting terrible fungal infections because they don't have the means or the knowledge to manage their hair with all of that stuff on there. So these young women are very early finding it hard to be themselves. So through the second E, which is empowerment, I do my best to kind of give them the permission. Look, you don't have to do all of that. You are fine just the way you are. And if there is a suggestion otherwise, it is deceptive messaging to you so that you can become a consumer very, very early on of the cosmetic industry. And so that empowerment, helping them take the authority to just be themselves, helping them to gain the confidence, letting them know that who they are and how they were born to be is satisfactory. And that if God wanted you to have, 1-inch eyelashes, you would have 1-inch eyelashes. And just helping them accept just who they are in general. And then the third E, so we have enlightenment, we have empowerment, and then we have engagement. And that is where I try to help young women just just engage, meaning in their relationships with their family, their friends, the world around them, so that now that they have information, now that they've been given permission to just be themselves, now you got to go do it, right? So whether that's in the classroom, whether that's going around your friends, finally deciding that you want to wear your natural hair and you don't care what anybody else says, and just going and doing it, whether it's speaking in front of the class, or, all of your friends want to play sports, but you want to try band, and just go out there and just be, and to do, and to feel okay being and doing what you feel makes you you. And, so this is something that I work through with young women, but and girls, and I know that this is something that needs to be worked through with 30, 40, 50-year-old women. And how do I know this? I know this because there are so many women's empowerment focus groups, workshops, conferences. They're so abundant because we have a society of women that have been receiving mixed messages. And so I can really kind of sum all of that up and really end the episode by saying, in 6 words, you may have heard me say this before, but empowerment can be summed up in 6 words. Accept your own and be yourself. Accept your own and be yourself. And that is one of the biggest challenges that women have, is to accept who we are and to be ourselves. And I have to say, we do not need to use sexuality, sensuality, and sex appeal to feel confident. Just be yourself and be confident in who you are. And sure, sexuality is a part of who you are, but it is not the predominant aspect of any woman, right? So we have to know this ourselves and share this message with our young ladies, that we nor they need to take off our clothes to be empowered. We don't need to objectify ourselves. I remember when Luke, the rapper, would have, kind of degrading language, and then the rappers would have women on stage that would be dancing in very lewd and provocative ways, or when there would be sporting events and men would have women being very lewd and provocative. And we all talked about this terrible objectification of women. This is so terrible. But now we have adopted the objectification ourselves. And we have, in a way, we've devolved to this self-degradation, but we mask it with a false cloak of empowerment. So now we have women who are prancing around nearly nude, talking about, I'm being empowered. Well, who decided that is what it was empowerment? Who decided that for us? And I would suggest that it wasn't a woman that decided that it's being empowered to take our clothes off and, to prance and to strut and to drop and pop and all of this. This isn't something that is a natural mindset of any woman, because anything that's exposed is vulnerable. And anything that we value, we hide, we conceal, right? We cover it up. We tuck it away. We put it away. And so now we have this strange reversal where we will make ourselves vulnerable by taking off our clothes and overexposing ourselves. So I'm asking, are we empowered or are we overexposed? And so I think about that, those natural resources that are just hard to access, that we've decided is just so valuable. And the value is in the inaccessibility of it. So for example, diamonds, right? Gold. We have to dig deep in the earth for both diamonds and gold. And pearls. We have to dive deep to get pearls. And only those who are worthy enough, worthy by their efforts or worthy by their access to wealth, only those who are worthy can obtain these treasures that are hard to come by. And just think about it. If they were easily accessible, we would not value them as much. I have plenty of stones and rocks around my house, but I'm not going to bring it in and put it on a ring or put it on a chain, put it on a necklace, because it's common. They're common. I see that everywhere. I see stones and pebbles and rocks everywhere, but I don't see diamonds everywhere. I don't see pearls everywhere. I don't come across gold everywhere. And if we did, then we would value it less. And so the same with us, if we are overexposing ourselves. Now, there is nothing more precious and treasured than a woman. And I'm not saying this because I am trying to put down the value of a man. No, I definitely believe that men are valuable and men are powerful. But in this conversation, we're talking about women. And I believe that women should be elevated. I believe that women should be honored and should be revered. And because we are precious and because we have limitless worth and because we are priceless, then I think that because we are valuable, then we too should protect that which is valuable. And I don't think that it is fair for us to have this idea promoted that our power lies in our sexuality. The power of a woman is in the mind, and because of what she can produce with her mind. A woman can create harmony with her mind. She can create love with her mind. She can create chaos if she wants with her mind. And so we have to stop replacing our minds with our behinds, if you will, putting more value on our the showing of our beauty. In a woman, we have natural beauties, and we're made to attract men. I mean, we're designed. We are just gorgeous. And so that part is the easy part, attraction, because we are wired for that, to attract men. But the challenge for us is our minds and what we can produce and the change that we can produce in the world, whether that is positive or whether that is negative, that we can produce with our minds. And so I want to see our young women valuing the power of their minds. I don't think this overexposure is healthy. I do. I believe that we are overexposed. And I believe that we are overexposed because we don't understand our worth. I don't think we understand our value. And I think that our young ladies are emulating what they see us doing in what I believe is our error. So when we are empowered, when we are really empowered, meaning that we are self-possessed, meaning that we know ourselves, that we know and understand others because we understand people, when we know what we want and we know how to influence others to get what we want or access resources to create what we want, I believe that when we have that, we are empowered. When we understand how to accept our own and be ourselves, and when we actually do that, accept our own and be ourselves, I believe then we are empowered. And so I think about the axiom that says the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Well, for me, I also believe that the shortest distance between self-hate and self-worth is just accepting our own and being ourselves. And our young women wouldn't invest so much in these frivolous expenses of cheap weaves and cheap makeup and cheap eyelashes, and risking their health. Risking the health of their skin, risking the health of their eyes, risking the health of their hair, because they're trying to costume themselves like they see those who are performing on television through the vehicle of entertainment. When we accept our own and be ourselves, that is when we've reached the point of empowerment. And we have to understand, ladies, that our self-worth, or rather our low self-worth, is so marketable. We have t-shirts and other gimmicks that push women's empowerment or the feminism or feminist movement or body positive merchandise. We are marks because traditionally society is putting low self-esteem and low self-worth in women, and it starts while we're girls. And so our low self-esteem is marketable. That is why there's so many conferences. That's why there's so many workshops and t-shirts and coffee mugs, because the world knows that women, specifically Black women, have low self-esteem, and we don't love who we are, and we are trying to do everything we can to attach something to ourselves so that we could be beautiful, so that we could be desirable, so that we could be worthy. But we are naturally worthy. And this is something that we have to push. We have to promote this to our young people. I know, mothers who tell their daughters, you have those pretty legs, you should show them off. Or, you have, that full bosom, you should show it off. But why? What is gained in revealing the beauty of our bodies to people who have not labored or earned that access? So then we cheapen ourselves, right? I mean, I know there are cars that are not even advertised on television. There are certain vehicles that you'll see a Ford commercial, right? You'll see a BMW commercial. You might not see a Rolls Royce commercial, right? You'll see a Ford, a Toyota, a Honda, a Mazda, a Subaru. But there are some cars that you are never going to see a commercial for because they are exclusive. They are very, very, very valuable, and they're not easily accessed or accessible by everybody. And that in itself is part of its value, that everybody can't get it. And so we are so much more valuable than a car. We are so much more valuable than a vehicle. And, there's nothing more valuable than a woman. The woman is going to produce the nations. The woman is going to guide the thinking and the culture of the nations. And so understanding our value, understanding how we go about achieving empowerment, we must share this with our young women so that we don't have generation after generation of young women finally becoming 45 and hearing a positive word about herself at a conference and then realizing she's good enough. I see women, of a certain age finally coming into being. And I think, man, what could she have done? Or if she's done great things, how much greater could she have been? And how much greater could she have impacted other people if she knew 20 years ago what she knows now? So I don't want to hide the wisdom that I have that was shared with me when I was a very young girl. I want to share this with other women and young women so that we can skip ahead to the end. We don't have to go through hardship and, the expense that we spend in this lucrative beauty industry. We can just go right to accepting our own and being ourselves. So think about it. Are we empowered or are we overexposed? I remember when, years ago when Miley Cyrus came out and she was, doing that twerking thing and, sticking her tongue out and humping and grinding on anything that moved. I remember that at the time, a lot of Caucasian broadcasters were just highly offended. Bloggers were just highly offended. That was okay for us when we did it. We're empowered, or, we're body positive, or, that's okay when our entertainers do that, but not theirs, because they understand the value of a woman, and they don't want that for their girls. And there's a reason why they don't want that for their girls, because they understand the damage that can do to the mind and to the confidence and to the molding and shaping of a young woman. And so we should not be so short-sighted that we think because we have been abused, because our girls are sexualized at terribly young ages, that we should accept it just because it is. No, we shouldn't accept it just because it has been. We can change these outcomes, and we can change what our young women think about themselves, and we can change what our young men think about our young ladies. And but it all starts with us. It always starts with the woman. So when you have an informed woman, you have an informed community and an informed nation. When you have a woman that lacks confidence and lacks self-esteem, well, then the community and the nation is going to lack confidence and lack self-esteem, because we can't put in our children what we lack ourselves. So I hope this message is enlightening. I hope this message is empowering, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. You can share your comments at Nora@noraspeaks.com, Nora@noraspeaks.com. Feel free to leave a rating or review, or hit me up on social media. You can find me at the Nora Speaks podcast, and I really welcome your insights. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.